Good afternoon. It's a very cold and chilly Friday, December the 25th. I am back in the reading nook. Basically, got some more interesting things to unbox. I've also got a cup of tea because it's chilly. So the first one today is this. Okay, this is Dallas, the television role-playing game. It was published by SBI in 1980, and that's particularly one reason why I am going to be writing a review of it today. But this is, if not the first licensed role-playing game, okay, it came out before Call of Cthulhu. It is arguably the first licensed role-playing game to be based on a license that is not fantasy or science fiction or any other genre. It's a soap opera role-playing game. Okay. Okay. Another thing is basically when it came out, I remember that Dallas was really big. It was a hugely popular soap opera all around the world. There were other games as well. Yakinto put out a board game as part of their album series. But in this, you are your favourite character. In an exciting and realistic way, you take on the attributes and abilities of one of the 9 major characters from the television show Dallas. Your talents to persuade, coerce, and even romance members of the opposite sex are all accounted for in your special character sheet that describes the values of others. You can play the role of JR, Jock, Miss Ellie, Bobby, Pam, Sue Ellen, Lucy, Cliff, or Ray. You even direct the episode. In the game, one player assumes the role of the director, with the aid of original scripts and expensive notes provided in the game. The director sets the scenes, prompts the action, and springs surprises on the player characters as they vie with one another to achieve individual goals defined by the director. You control minor characters, from forgers to environmentalists, from the Mexican Farm Workers Union to the FBI. You have 37 people and organisations, with each represented by its own card to be sought or avoided by your major character. You use your own abilities to dominate or destroy, capture and control these pawns in a game of power. But be careful, these minor characters can be deadly in an opponent's hands. Okay? Create your own scripts or use your own. The game comes complete with 3 original ready-to-play scripts that outline the player's objectives and instruct the director in running each scene. Extensive support material and guidelines, including 70 suggested plot devices, allow anyone to construct an original episode that will be interesting, unpredictable, and exciting. Okay? Dallas, the television role-playing game, is suitable for ages 12 through adult. Time to play. The game may vary, though a typical game will take 2 to 3 hours. Easy to learn, exciting to play. Dallas, the television role-playing game, is an exciting evening of fun for the entire family. Okay, so this is an attempt, essentially, to cross over from the role-playing hobby, which was growing back in 1980, into the mainstream. Okay, really can't be any other reason really to go after this, because it's such another license for any publisher, to be honest. Let alone SBI, which was better known as a wargaming, a publisher of war games. Okay, and the thing is, it's actually designed by James Dunnigan, okay, who is one of the greatest designers of war games in the hobby. Jutland, notable battle game that came out in 1967, but there have been numerous others, and he started SBI himself to basically keep the magazine strategy and tactics going, and also publish his own designs. So what you get in here is okay, when you open up, that's what you get. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, and 2 of these little dice. Okay, I've only got one in my set. It was missing when I bought it, so you've got 3 books: Rules of Play, Scriptwriter's Guide, and the Major Characters folio. And so I'll go through and have a look at one of these one by one. So let's start off with the Rules of Play. This includes, it's short. It's 16 pages long, and it includes, you've got the complete rules of play, the 3 ready-to-play scenarios, scripts and so on. Okay, and inside it's written like this, and these look like wargaming rules, right down to the notation. So, section 4.0, character creation. 4.1, negotiation. 4.2, conflict, and so on. And what the game revolves around is, usually over the course of about 5 acts, the players are using essentially a set of means to persuade, seduce, coerce, or investigate their rivals. And every character has a set of stats. So they have basically stats for their persuasion, coercion, seduction, and investigation scores. Okay, they have 2 for each. One represents essentially their resistance, and one represents their ability to apply those factors. And then they have a luck factor. And what happens is you will have one character going up against another, and they will compare their persuasion value versus their resisting persuasion value, and basically deducting one from the other to generate basically a spread. If you get 12 or more, you automatically succeed. If not, you roll the dice and attempt to beat 12 or more. And it's as simple as that. And if that fails, characters get a luck roll to resist the attempt. And this can be this is generally to ownership of the various plot cards, organisations, NPCs, objects, and so on. You play basic members of the cast of Dallas, which means essentially in a game you can have 9 people sat around the table, okay, as the cast, and then you have the director, who is bringing out new information, bringing in new plot point cards and so on. So you'll have to do a bit of preparation for that at the start of each act. And in each act, essentially, is 2 phases where you have the negotiation. Each player attempting to sort of deal with his rivals, deal with his allies, make alliances, and so on. I'm going, okay, I'll go for this if you go for that, etc., etc. And then they have their action where they attempt to influence or coerce, investigate, and so on the others. And you basically you have the fallout from that, and then you go on to the next act. And at the end of the game, every player basically sort of checks to see whether they've achieved particular objectives. So, for example, let's have a look. In this. In this scenario, you have J.R. Ewing basically here, and then here's a list of his objectives. He basically wins if he achieves sort of like a certain number of those particular those. So basically, okay. So in this scenario, there's an old Spanish land grant has come up. Okay, J.R. Ewing wants it because he can suppress the value of local land and then buy it for a song. So he wins, okay, if he is able to bribe the Justice Department official, basically own the Texas Rangers. I say own, basically have them in his pocket, the local press, local police, basically control a senator's press conference his way, Department of the Interior, okay, and so on and so on. So you have all these characters, and essentially here's what they kind of look like there, because everyone has this information in front of them. So what you've got next, below that, you have the scriptwriter's guide. On the back, there's a sample scene. And here you've got director's notes on teaching, on teaching the rules, a bit more information on running the game, and then how to write your own game scripts and so on. List of plot devices, character biographies of essentially not the main characters, but the essentially what you would call the NPCs by today's standards, and organisations and so on. And then you've got background on Texas. What you don't have really is background on Dallas in here, which is a little bit odd. I mean, it's in the characters, but there's no background. There's no sort of like the equivalent of like a setting Bible for a television series. Okay, for Dallas, which you would think would have been an obvious inclusion. And then in the third book, you have essentially character sheets. So basically you can separate all these, and then you have character sheets. So that's the one for J.R. Ewing, and essentially it lists all the other characters and their persuasion, coercion, seduction, and investigation values, and then their special modifications and so on, and personal victory conditions for each of the 3 episodes, and then some background. And there's also a bit of advice here, and here's where it's interesting. Okay, it says, playing a male character in Dallas usually allows you to throw your weight around. It is easy to make enemies in the game, so you'd use your power judiciously to make friends rather than enemies. Even when you have to do something to do unpleasant to someone, do it with style, apologise before lowering the boom, and so on. You should avoid assuming a stereotyped strong arm role, which may be tempting for a powerful male character. And it says this for all the male characters, okay? But for the female characters, playing a female character in Dallas requires, for the most part, that you stick together with the other female characters. While men are generally more powerful, they also have more difficult personal goals. They also have more difficult personal goals for the most part. The men will spend much of their time attacking one another, but they will bully after the female characters as well when they need something, and a female character and allied with other women is an easy target. Right, so essentially the game essentially, again, it models the TV series and it's misogynistic. You can't get away from that, okay? The cards themselves really kind of split into 2 types. So let's have a look. So here's basically an NPC, okay, and they have their own power, persuasion, values, etc., and so on, and their own luck at the end, okay. And then you'll find there are let's have a look. Also in here, objects. So D to Lowe's Ranch, and they will be out in front of the when they're involved in an episode, they will be out in front of on the table, or they'll come to play at the beginning of different acts and so on. Some people will have them in front of them in their pockets, some won't. Okay, so Dallas the television role-playing game. It was a flop. It didn't succeed. Okay, it's a curio from 1980. But what's interesting is that it prefigures, it does something which most role-playing games don't do. It's adversarial. It prefiguring essentially the Amber role-playing game. And as written, it's kind of not a role-playing game. It's almost like a party game, like a murder mystery game, more than it is sort of like a traditional role-playing game. And in some ways, you probably wouldn't use this as a role-playing game to play a game of Dallas now, although you could. You'd go to something like, say, for example, Fiasco could do it, or especially with the cards now. I mean, basically, it sort of like Dallas was in 1980. Also, you use something like Prime Time would do it very well because it's designed to do television role playing. But I think as an adaptation of a license, it's interesting. It's well written. But it says it's easy to play, but it's kind of not, because the way it's presented is sort of, it's again like a war game, and that's off-putting, I think. And the numbers and the complexity of that, although it's actually quite straightforward and simple, it's would put people off. It's too complex for the mainstream audience, but it's kind of not the right subject for the role-playing audience of the time. And I still don't think that people would necessarily want to play this unless out of interest. Just, okay, let's have a go, see what this is like. And then they probably wouldn't play it again. Or even write their own scripts or come back to it. But there it is. It's an interesting curio. It's an attempt to do something different in 1980, and it didn't work. It would take really sort of like, you know, another sort of like 20 to 30 years of design. So when you get to things like Fiasco and say, which does, heists gone wrong kind of thing, stories, or even Leverage, based on the television TNT Leverage series, okay, where the designers had more experience at handling genre. Whereas, to be fair, as good as a designer James Donegan is of war games, he's not really a role-playing game designer. He's opted for some quite simple rules, but I'm not entirely. They don't really kind of succeed necessarily. It feels almost too procedural rather than, the players getting down and into basically playing their characters and being Sue Ellen or Lucy or Bobby or JR and so on. Okay, so yeah, Dallas, the role-playing game, or the television role-playing game, is an interesting curio from a bygone age, an experiment that didn't succeed. I think it's not unplayable, but obviously there are better things that have come along since. In the 40 years since, the industry's got better at designing two particular genres. But Dallas itself, Dallas the role-playing game, is an interesting first attempt. So I want to thank you for watching another unboxing in the Nook. If you've liked this, please click like or add a comment, that'd be great. If you want to see more of these and be alerted, you can also click subscribe. In the meantime, enjoy your day, and I'll be back soon with another unboxing the Nook. Bye for now.